Okay, so now we're going to discuss witchcraft and if it was a crime created by the monarchs or why some people see it that way. The context of this is that previously witches had been tolerated. They were simply local wise women who were often healers using herbal remedies to heal wounds. People couldn't afford doctors, so they would go to these local wise women for help. Witchcraft was accepted as long as things didn't go wrong. The reason why some people will see it as a crime as monarchs, created by the monarchs, we'll explore in a bit more detail. But the monarch was the authority of the day, so their teachings influenced the beliefs of the population. So as we're going through this, if it's what the monarch believed, it's what people in general started to believe. What you'll see as well during this witchcraft section is you'll see it sort of bubbling and bubbling and bubbling, and then peaking in the witch craze during the English Civil War, and then going away again. So we'll look at how it gradually increases, boom, witch craze, and then the decline. So the witch craze happened due to a combination of factors. Was it a monarch-made crime? There's a fear of witches which steadily escalated through a succession or series or sequence of monarchs. First of all, you've got Henry VIII, who in 1542 passed a law that made witchcraft a serious crime. One of the reasons for this being, as we've discussed previously, witchcraft was very secretive and the Tudors were paranoid, therefore they don't like the secrecy associated with witchcraft. This persecution of witchcraft increased during the reign of Elizabeth I, passing two laws defining two types of witchcraft: major witchcraft, which means trying to bring about somebody's death, or trying to raise the dead, as major witchcraft and punishable by death. Minor witchcraft was all of the types of witchcraft, herbal healing and remedies and all this type of thing. This increases further in 1597 when James I, who's not the monarch yet but is heir to the throne, writes a book entitled Demonology, detailing how to find witches and how to test for them. James I then becomes king in 1603, and in 1604 passes a law which enforces and strengthens all other witchcraft laws, and this increases witch hunts. So why does society start to believe it in witches and witch hunts? Well, on the one hand, you've got the increasing legislation introduced by monarchs, but you've also got religious aspects, the long-standing impacts of the Reformation, Henry VIII's break with Rome. Henry had converted England to Protestantism in the Reformation, which made heresy a much more serious crime, as Protestant monarchs were now head of the church and country. Witchcraft was now a crime against the church, but also now a crime against the monarch, and both of these crimes carry capital offences, as in are punishable by death, and they are intertwined. Therefore, witchcraft now challenges both of these institutions. You've also got simple economic hardship. People were struggling. Begging had exploded during this time period, which led to many poor people being denounced as witches. Simply, I can't afford to give you any money, so I'm just going to say you're a witch, and then the problem's gone for me if I'm a wealthy person. Unemployment also increased, and jealousy amongst neighbours increased. This increased tensions and led to simple bad luck being blamed on witchcraft. So if something bad happens to me, I'm looking for someone to blame because there's some tension and suspicion among society, so I would denounce somebody as a witch. It's also a time of immense social changes, the breakdown of the family unit. You've got civil war leading to lots of widows, and also lots of men simply having to leave the families to search for work. This tore families apart. What this means is there's an increase in spinsters, as they were called at the time, single women who had no families. They've got no way to support themselves and can't do any work. So they'd previously been supported by their families but were now alone, so had no alternative but to turn to herbal remedies as a way to try and make some money to support themselves. In addition to that, you've got the point at which the witchcraft crimes peak and leading to the witch craze, 1642 to 1649, the English Civil War. Massive tension in society, and also parliaments fighting the monarch. You have a breakdown of law and order. This leads to an increase in the number of widows and heightened tensions in the community. In addition to that, law and order was weakened as authorities fought each other. This led to people getting away literally with murder. You get an increase in accusations and vigilantes, people taking the law into their own hands such as Matthew Hopkins, the Witchfinder General, capitalised on people's fears and exploited them by going into towns and saying, oh, I can find witches for you, but you'll have to pay me. So you get an increase in vigilante justice because law and order is broken down and the authorities are fighting each other. So this steady escalation culminates in the witch craze in the mid-1600s during the English Civil War. Unofficial trials were unfair, and basically flimsy evidence was used to convict women and find them guilty. Children often testified against people as witnesses, or other people already found guilty of being witchcraft simply blamed others as well to try and get lighter sentences for themselves, or just to drag other people down with them. The victims of witchcraft, of this witch craze, were obviously mainly women. This means that witchcraft was a misogynistic crime. It's got origins within the Bible's teaching regarding Adam and Eve. Women were the ones who were left widowed, so were more likely to turn to witchcraft to support themselves, resulting in a gendercide. Around 97% of witchcraft trials were regarding women. Another belief in this, going back to the idea of Adam and Eve, it was Eve that was tricked by the snake, and therefore women were more likely, they believed, to be influenced by the devil and tricked, and therefore more likely and susceptible to turn to witchcraft. So, what type of evidence did they use to catch witches and convict them, to see if they were actually a witch or not? Well, first of all, they would look for unusual marks on the body, birthmarks which had been used to feed the witch's familiar, the familiar being the witch's animal, the messengers of the devil with whom it was believed the witches used to speak to. You also have the needle test, pricking the skin to locate a part insensitive to pain. That was believed to be the devil's mark. You've also got neighbours' testimonies, community-based, hearing people talking to their familiar. So basically, people would live next door to somebody and they would go to the authorities or a witch finder and say, oh, I heard them speaking to their cat last night, so they must be a witch. You also got possessed children, in quotation marks, children who had seen witches or who had seen the familiars acting in suspicious ways, or the children had been possessed themselves, would point out who had possessed them. Let's get confessions of witches. So why would people confess themselves to being a witch? Simply through the use of torture, sleep deprivation. Witch finders would torture witches who would then admit to anything just to get the torture to stop. You've also got proof of guilt. Two accused witches simply, not stealing, you should say snitching on each other. They both just blame each other for being a witch and therefore they're both guilty. You could also do the swimming or the ducking test, which was based on the Anglo-Saxon trial by cold water. It was introduced by Charles I. If you sank, you were innocent because the water had accepted you, the blessed water. However, if you floated, it was because the blessed holy water had rejected you and therefore you were guilty and would face punishment. You've also got vigilantes. For example, the Witchfinder General Matthew Hopkins. Very important, these guys, because the Civil War allowed them to exploit the beliefs and hysteria of the period. Matthew Hopkins accused 36 women of being witches and 19 were hanged. His investigators were paid a fee to find the witches, easy money. However, he was stopped when law and order was restored in 1646. Reasons for the decline in witch trials. First off, you've got the end of the English Civil War. It ended in 1649. Some will say the first part of it ended in 1646. That's why you've got that earlier date previously. Law and order was restored to communities and vigilantes were stopped from conducting illegal witch trials. Witchcraft does remain a crime until 1736, and in some rural areas and more suspicious areas, superstitious areas I should say, witch trials continued, but the witch craze was over. In 1751, a woman called Ruth Osborne was accused of being a witch. She was swum as a trial and died. However, the ringleaders, the people who conducted the trial, were then charged and executed for her murder. This shows a clear shift in attitudes from authorities. This was accepted during the English Civil War. By 1751, it is no longer acceptable. You've also got a wider European context. People in Italy and the Renaissance across Europe meant that people in Italy and other European countries had begun to question old values. This led to the Age of Enlightenment. the question of enlightenment, the questioning of religion, the rebirth of thinking and science is used to explain things more logically, a shift towards rational explanations. The improved scientific understanding, for example, Isaac Newton's discovery of gravity. You've also now got a clear shift in attitudes from the monarchs, as shown by the Royal Society, created in the reign of Charles II. From 1660 onwards, this increased scientific experiments and discoveries, specifically supported and encouraged by the king. This shows a clear shift in monarchs' attitudes. Before the Civil War and 100 years previously, in Henry VIII's time, you see the monarch actively saying there are witches everywhere. By the time you get to Charles II, 1660, the monarch is supporting scientific discovery, a clear shift in attitudes. You've also got the weakening influence of religion. Following the execution of Charles I, divine right had been challenged, leading to people developing a more rational attitude towards things. A gradual decline in the church's influence, but people are looking for logical explanations, not simply blaming witches for everything. There's also economic recovery. One thing which caused the witchcraft craze was jealousy amongst neighbours. Now you've got economic recovery. People simply started to become better off. They had more money. This reduces tension in villages and reduces jealousy and suspicion amongst neighbours.